I think because Sargent is so good, he hides the element of art that's carrying the message. I think his brushstrokes is so seductive. I think his ability to reproduce a texture is uncanny. I think his capturing the likeness and the personality is off the chart. And because of that, sometimes you miss the simple things. And I don't know if the class appreciated Sorolla as much as I did. It was way overlit, overexposed, almost a half to a full stop every picture. He painted things at dusk with 3 or 5 floodlights and skylights in the middle of the noon coming through. Well, at dusk, nothing's hitting his canvas. It's dark.
How does his age compare to Sargent?
The same. Yeah. So when I told the class I felt like the lighting was not correct, I took my phone and I darkened a couple of pictures, and pictures started to glow on our cameras and not in real life. So I can't say I looked at this show and was overwhelmed with the show. But I can say I'm beyond excited that I went. Now, did Ryan miss something? Yeah, without a doubt, Ryan. You will never have better tacos than what we experienced on the last day. Tell me if that's not the truth. Okay. And the cheese dip, the queso, I was just using my fingers and skipped the fork after a while. I even tried a straw for a while. It was just off the chart. But here's what I saw. My idea of it, the painting's about one element of art and everything else is subordinate, and it's in the painting. There's color in every painting. There's color in a black and white painting. There's color in everything because there's different shades of black and white. I kept saying, don't you see it in Sargent? But the world kept saying no. And is it because he's so talented and sophisticated and everything, you're seduced by the other stuff and you don't see what he's really doing? But with Sorolla, it was blatant. So now it makes me want to back up and say, who is teaching this? You have 2 artists who understand this concept. Okay, there's no longer one person. And they're not together. Who's teaching this? There's a fantastic book called Principles of Art History by Heinrich Wölfflin. If you like to read word for word in German translated to England with the adjective and verb in the wrong place of the sentence and have to kind of play Scrabble with every sentence to figure out what are the possibilities of this sentence. But I will tell you this about that book. You might want to skip the intro too to at least feel like you've accomplished something, because Greg, who is a classical architect and studies art for the last 30 years, has never gotten out of the intro twice. I will say this about that book. I have never seen a case in any painting where everything he says in this book isn't 100% spot on. That's tough to say. Okay, this is an art historian. Who's teaching this? Who in the art school knows this? Right? It's not taught by Panofsky and the different art historians prior to it. So where is it coming from? So when I looked at this painting is about the beautiful material of the drapery on the bed. Okay? And the way he captures that is it's the halftone value next to the highlight and the abruptness that shows that highlight. Now, because we're going to go see the Sargent show, we're going to do the next 3 weeks as prep work for the Sargent show. I need you to know what he did and why. Does that make sense? So we're going to waste a few days just playing with how to do that and how did he do that. Does that make sense? And this is done differently. With Sargent, this is done where you paint it in, but you don't have the abrupt value enough. And the only way you get that richness is by glazing it darker and darker with those reds. And then when you hit the whites, it jumps off the page. So 2-3 coats of glaze and then hit that, man, it will look like that satin. And that's where Sargent gets that shine from. This guy doesn't do that. The difference between this guy and Sargent is Sargent's looks good up close. His looks good from across the room. And from across the room, this was beautiful. Okay, so this is about the texture of the material. And even the texture of the material on the right side of that see-through gown, was that her wedding dress? Looking at her ring. She's looking at her ring. So I just think the overblending, using a sable brush and overblending the flesh tone destroys the color, but the overblending gave its own texture, soft. And the shine of the material and the abruptness and the shine of the ring. And I'm telling you, we had some incredibly talented people there at that show. None of them are here today, but I'm messing with them. Okay. I mean, between Margaret and Karen and Vicky and Lori and Miyuki, nobody ever mentioned that she's wearing a glove. 3 sides to a box on those fingers? How many fingers does she have? Are they all there? Kind of webby, kind of like a glove. Nobody complained. So what Sorolla is saying is this painting's about the textures. Leave everything else out. Oh, do you like all the juxtaposing of flesh tones? I love the warm and cool grays in the flesh tones. I just love the way he handled that. The losing and finding of edges within the fingers.
How big is that painting in real life?
Pretty big. Pretty big. Okay, I'm making a video on this. I'll work a little bit on each week on it. So I'm not going to waste today on it. And especially, it's going to come back. This picture is also about texture. Even though it's a little girl, it's about the brushstrokes and the textures and the way he makes a mark. He's blatant. Sargent is elevated. Sargent is hobnobbing with people where it has to look refined, but do the same thing without anyone knowing you did it. Though his comment was, a portrait is another lost friend. So the entire show was lighter than this, but this is when I just underexposed Lightroom half a stop. That's dusk. That's the end of the day. That's like Sargent Spain pictures, the end of the day. There's a quietness to them. Okay? So tell me what you think this one painting is about. I'm about to show you. Texture, pattern, contrast, color. Huh? Don't tell me all.
That's what I'm tempted to say.
Well, all the elements are in every painting. Yes. So Lori said, is the quality of light an element of art? I think the painting can be about the quality of light and the time of day. And then you have to drag out of your box which element to carry your message. So is the painting about the quality of light and that time of day? Yes. Almost every picture is. And that could be why everyone always says, you must get your values right first. Values are more important than color. And I'm going to say I agree with them. Sorta. Does that make sense? You have to get the quality of light right. The no tan is off the chart huge. The halftone is off the chart huge. And those are new things for me in the last 5 years. The quality of light and the halftone. And yet I wrote about the quality of light in a book I read 30 years ago. So it's one of those things when my wife comes up with an idea and shares it with me, and 10 years later I come to her and I said, hey, I thought of something. And she looks at me like, I think we had this talk 20 years ago. So yes, but you still have to pick the element that's going to deliver. It's the train that's pulling the load, but all the elements are in every painting. So I didn't mean to pull up two of the same pictures. I'm sorry. Color. Do you see 3 sides to the box on that leg? No. No, Chuck, you don't. Please tell me you don't. Chuck, how about the column on the left? Does that look like one flat column almost? So here's the problem. The problem is you know too much. Right?
I don't know if I've ever.
Where's Susan? You know too much. I thought of the most intelligent person in the room. I couldn't find her. She's on her phone typing, texting.
Am I the only one in the room that the lighting on the frame, I think, affects the way I look at that painting? It's almost like I'd like to see it without that.
Your wish is my command.
Thank you. See if my eye sees it differently without that. Because there's something about that frame and the lighting. Normally, I don't.
There were so many floodlights in there, Chuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we block that out, that might be easier for me to get the right answer.
Well, there's only 5 choices, and eventually I think you'll get the right answer.
Process of elimination. Yeah. My mind gets distracted too easily, I guess.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, if I add a little highlight, contrast, or texture to the painting somewhere else, my mind gets distracted and I lost the message. We have a fine line to teeter. You can either put everything in and then lose all the edges, or you can put everything in and fan it, lose everything, and say, okay, now what do I find? Well, the same thing goes with color. Wouldn't it make sense to put the most important color in once and then decide what goes in? Even texture, pattern, and contrast. Now, Sargent, I'm telling you, there's a tight line between too much and not, and he teeters it, but man, when it's done, you're saying, wow. Here's the part I want you to take away with when we're in Boston. Lord Ribblesdale or any of these people, he paints this guy who was I think he was a clothing designer, and he hung out with Oscar Wilde or whoever the guy was. And I'm telling you, I think it's a 3 foot by 8 inch wide brushstroke of one black on a beautiful painting. Because Sargent said, if I do any more, it'll take away. Sorolla said the same thing. Who's teaching this? Who's teaching this? This was huge for me as a teacher. I have the proof in the pudding now. I have these pieces that are telling me this is what this is about. This is about color. I just wish it was lit better. But we have images, and I don't care, you know. I have the images I have.